Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. This was a fun little game to play, and this is the channel was the second time I played it. As it keeps up the tradition started in the first game, but adjusts some of the mechanics in it. Well, they changed the earnings mechanics a bit. Now, it does continue the story of Ezio, as well as follows our modern day protagonists, Desmond Miles and the assassins. But it changes some things up. First off, when we start the story of Ezio, he has returned from Rome um, to the villa, as I can never pronounce the name of the place the villa is supposed to be in. Well, but before we even get into that, I should note that the assassins, basically on the run from their last hideout, have come to the villa in the modern day. And so they make their base of operations basically in the same chamber that Ezio's armor was, well, Altair's armor was in. And so, you know, Desmond has to set up some things so they can, quote, leech power without, appearing too obvious that they're there. Of course, this is after, making his way into the place. And then we join Ezio in the past, right after his defeat of Rodrigo Borgia. Of course, things don't go as planned there, because he comes back to a bit of a celebration. And, of course, also recapping everyone on what happened underneath the Vatican. Of course, it's also confessed there that Ezio did not kill Rodrigo. But as things play out, this it wouldn't have bit him in the butt anyhow. Because Cesar Borgia decides to attack, catching them all unaware. I mean, they just had a nice little celebration. And Catalina welcomed Ezio back in her own way. But of course, everything falls apart. They do their best to defend, but also get the people out of the town. Of course, the defense doesn't necessarily go well. The people got out safely. Ezio manages to fight things off, but he too is injured, and, well, he is basically doing everything he can, well, to get away. He ends up being brought back to Rome. There being Machiavelli, bringing him abreast of the up to date on the situation in Rome. Rome is in dire shape, thanks to the Borgias, which introduces us to one of the mechanics of the game. Basically, building, the towers, where we have to bring them down in order to, bring some financial security to Rome and revitalize it. I did not necessarily do that in this game, in this playthrough, because, well, I cleared the towers because you also get another feature in this one, which is fellow assassins. That's, of course, introduced later. You see, after, taking out at least one of the towers, we get to our location of our base, which is Tiber Island in Rome. And we start in on things. We start in on the various things. We have to, of course, reduce, we have to build things up in Rome. The Borgia is a big faction, but to take care of them, you must undermine them. This means getting rid of the towers. This means getting rid of, cutting off their funds for Rodrigo's for Caesar's army. Rodrigo is starting to get wary of his own kin. And even the family you start to see fall apart as they lose power, too. As we work through it, we find out various things. The Thieves Guild is not in good shape in Roma. So La Volpe has come in. Our friend, I can't remember his name, but I remember the sword, Bianca. Well, he's in Rome, trying to help fend off the French troops that Caesar has brought in. And of course, we now have the brothel, which we have to take care of, which comes under the care, which will eventually come under the care of Ezio's sister and his mother, who has recovered from all the trauma that happened in the previous game to a degree. He was not about to let his little sister take over a brothel. The thing is, just because you're a madam doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be opening your legs for everybody. And so, we begin on basically tearing down the roots, as well as getting our own assassins together. Great plan, great plan. But La Volpe is not entirely sure that that Machiavelli is on the assassin side. Certain things about how these attacks played out doesn't mesh well. It seems to hint that there is a spy in the midst. Now, of course, this would work well, but even Ezio is not entirely sure of it, and would like to keep trusting Machiavelli. Now we have to work on getting rid of Rodrigo's forces, and, Rodrigo and Caesar's forces. This is, of course, done by, quote, getting rid of the towers, but there is also another faction in Rome. cult of Romulus. And you can tell that they really are, deep in the lore of Rome because they are very they wear costumes that are reminiscent of wolves. Now, if you want fighting all of them is optional. You have to fight one group at the beginning, as it would help crack the code of how information's being sent. Because apparently the Borgias have entrusted the cult to have all that information. I don't know why. They're crazy, but so this all factors into things. So of course you have to establish a thief's center in town. You have to establish a thieves guild. You have to save protect the Barretts, and of course wipe out some more of the quote towers. I think it told you only really have to wipe out. If you're not playing the whole thing, there are certain ones you'll have to wipe out, and especially if you want to get all the items, especially the best armor in the game, which is actually armor of Romulus. Looks wolf-like, but damn, keeps you safe. Anyhow, you work your way through things. Trying to find, first you have to rescue Katerina Sforza, which kind of shows that Ezio is not about, well, Ezio doesn't necessarily want to wipe out a woman, I guess. Unless, the situation has to call for it. He works on setting up things in Rome. And part of this was trying to, talk to the madam that was running the brothel in Rome, but she got taken hostage and killed. So now they have to set up a new leader. And here is the sister of Ezio's sister takes over. And of all things to happen, we get things going. But now you have other things. I mean, in order to advance some things, you need to get special items made. Well, Leonardo's in Rome, forced to work for the Borgias because that's where the money is. And he's been designing weapons for them. There are 4 weapons of Leonardo, and actually, if you complete the weapons in the game, take out all of them, you also get the ability to use a parachute in the game. Which is probably safer floating through the air than his flying machine in Assassin's Creed 2. But in order to talk to him, you first will have to locate him, and he'll give you one item. And then all you have to do to get another item from him is basically fight out, 2 more of those. Which takes you a little bit outside of Rome. But here's the thing. They are tough missions. One, you will be a flying machine. Another is a tank. A third one is a seagoing device. And another is a rapid fire weapon. I only did for this playthrough the tank and the rapid fire weapon. Although I have to admit, the C-varying one isn't too bad to do. This is also the first game that introduced synchronization. And each memory had an item in it that gave you full sync for the memory if you achieved it. And some of them just seemed they throw you. Trust me on that. Of course, after we rescue Christina, no, Katarina, we also come across, we start learning about where the Rodrigo, where Cesar gets all his money for the army. It's from the church, especially the banker, who is also a Borgia. Of course, we also see that Rodrigo is not necessarily happy with Cesar. So, in order to get to the banker, well, we have to a senator who owes individual who owes him money. Then get that money to where it goes. Of course, we have to act like we know what we're doing, which is also tricky. Once we get it there, we have to find a way to sneak in after the fact. Good thing we've got the working ladies on our side. Then we have to, once we get in using their help, we have to get closer, and the thing is you have to kill them. Of course, the way to do it is, one, you have to avoid detection. That's one. And then once he's dead, you have to escape, of course. Well, you do all that. And of course, once he's poisoned, the money flow stops. You also have to then get the French out. And given the tactics the French were using, which are, in some cases of war, very sound tactics, especially if you want to minimize bloodshed. Yeah, they capture our fighting friend's wife. Demand he surrender, or she gets it. Now, in a plan, they basically steal uniforms of some of the guards, sneak in, pretend they're taking, their friend, their mercenary friend in. I shouldn't say mercenary, military. In as a prisoner. Of course, once you get inside, okay, let's get him. That kind of thing. It's treacherous. But then again, they're matching treachery with treachery. And of course, all things considered, it makes sense. Then we get down to the point where we have to find out the truth. Who is the spy? And things are really looking like it's Machiavelli. And one of the sources was captured and is going to be killed at a production of the you know, death of Christ. And so we're working through that, and what do we find? Well, we get there in time, but the man's been poisoned because the person who was going to, quote, kill him probably wanted to be sure the guy was dead. Luckily, Ezio gets him to a medicine doctor that's nearby, and it is at that point that Ezio makes a discovery. One of the people nearby, Ezio remembers. And when Ezio's like, I remember you, well, all hell breaks loose. The man was one of the men that was at the villa. He was the Templar spy. Of course, once Ezio catches him and gets the truth revealed, and the man, of course, kills himself, because that's what you do. Don't ask me why. Ezio realizes that Volpe is about to make a mistake and makes a dash for the island hideout to stop Volpe before he does anything stupid. This causes an immediate reconciliation between Volpe and Machiavelli. And it also sets things up to locate the apple and then fight off Caesar. Of course, Caesar and Rodrigo have a fight, and Caesar kills Rodrigo, sparing his sister, because he figured she was delusional as hell. You know, she thought she'd end up being his wife. No, he wasn't thinking that. And so they retrieve the apple. They use it to fight off Caesar's forces. Caesar discovers that he has been now fully betrayed, even by all his allies, and disappears. Now Ezio is able to track him down, to which we now have a grand fight after making his way through all the fighting to get to him. This also ends the story part of this game, where we discover also that Ezio took that piece of Eden and hidden it somewhere. Somewhere in the Colosseum. Our modern day assassins make their way there, get into the place, manage to find the vault it was still put in, which is basically a first one's civilization setup. It is also where we discover that there are some spirit energy or something of first one still left. And it has detected that there is a traitor in the midst, and that, well, a price has to be paid. Sort of forcing Desmond to kill Lucy Stillman. Thus, causing something to happen in Desmond's mind. This is where the story ends, the main story, of course. Now, there are some add-ons that take part in the story of the game. or at a point later. For example, there is two DLCs that are added into the story. Well, there's two DLCs, and there's also something that you can unlock as you progress and get your quote synchronization in. The first DLC is the disappearance of Leonardo, to which you have to. Leonardo's been looking into things and found out another vault of First One stuff. Of course, there is a group that is very interested in using it for the very similar reason as the Templars might use it. So, of course, Ezio goes there to, you know, locates Leonardo's paintings, one of which has been claimed by Lucretia Borgia, although she's married to someone else now. And of course, once Ezio gets all these paintings together and discovers the location, he's able to find Leonardo. And it shows us one of the things that makes Ezio one of the best and well loved protagonists in Assassin's Creed. He has a very good nature about him. And while homosexuality definitely wasn't welcomed in that time, especially in a Catholic controlled area like Rome, Italia, Italy, Ezio says about Leonardo's current assistant, very good for you, I approve. Realizing there is more there than what Leonardo was going to openly say. Of course, getting down there, you get the location of where the important location that will pop up in Assassin's Creed 3. Because it gives him some, it has some coordinates there, which Leonardo doesn't fully understand. And Ezio's able to piece it together. It's like it's not for them. And of course, to get Leonardo's mind off of that, he asks him about Ezio asks him about one of his projects, because that is how Leonardo's mind works. There is another one in which we meet with Copernicus. And of course, Copernicus was definitely at odds with, quote, church, as he proposed a heliocentric system for the planets. And of course, because I guess he somehow fell out of favor with the Templars, they decided it was time to wipe him out, or at least somebody wanted to wipe him out. Of course, as he says to Ezio, he says, it is not always that we want to agree with who our benefactors are, but for me it's the pursuit of knowledge, and in hoping that we become smarter as a group. Now, the other thing that is introduced is, of course, the other mission is actually seeing Ezio's memories of Ezio's first love, which is Christina. And in these, as you unlock them, you see that Ezio is trying to help her. That Ezio first, that they sort of connect, and then because of what happened to Ezio's family, he has to, of course, She helps guide him to wherever his father and brother's corpses are, so they can have a proper or near proper sending off. They meet later and find that she's engaged now because, he was gone for a while. And he accepts that. Helps the man out. He helps the man out. Think he gets a chance to meet up with her again during the events of Assassin's Creed during Carnival. Of course, what he does angers her a little bit. But, it shows that story. But in order to get that, you have to get, constantly advancing synchronization in the game. Now, for some things, this is easy. All you gotta do is complete the memory. Others, you have to complete the memories with certain things, which I found, depending on the item it was giving you or the task it was giving you, it was actually easy to do some of them. I thought the one was insanely easy to do the first time I played it when I played it for the podcast games my mom found. In the one where where the truth about who was the real spy is. For full synchronization, it says you must not touch water. You must not swim. And dude, we're at the Coliseum. We're nowhere near the river. This is going to be easy. And then when you chase the guy and you learn the truth, you got to make it to the island. And I forgot that I had to not touch water the first time I did it. I'm like, shit. Of course, this time when I play it for the channel, I did it. Of course, with each one you unlock and do, you learn more about that story. Now, I said that this thing had some very interesting mechanics in it. In order to get income, which you have to acquire at banks, which means you have to renovate banks. Renovate banks, blacksmith shops, art districts, all of them. Well, art shops, doctors. All these can give you income. And you can even set up little places where, quote, either the courtesans or the mercenaries or the thieves can have an office in certain locations. Or, a branch office, so to speak. Well, you can even buy and remodel aqueducts. Trust me, you have to do that just so you can access one of the Romulan layers. And as everything plays out, to do that, you have to tear down, take out a Borgia Tower, which means to take it out, you must, 1, find and kill the captain, and then climb the tower and set it ablaze. All these towers are also viewpoints, so if you want to get all the viewpoints, you got to do all these. In fact, if you want to get all the viewpoints, you may have to do, there's certain items you have to get. Of course, every time you can't, and also by taking down a tower, you can actually get an assassin assistant, which, in order to get completion on some tasks, you actually have to use them. And you build them up throughout the game, by, sending them on missions, which also adds to your income. Of course, the higher they get, they can go through all 9 levels. Well, they start at level 1, work up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then once they're ready to be promoted to full assassin, you have to go back to your hideout and you see a little ceremony. You also see the ceremony when Ezio's sister becomes an assassin. It's a nice little mechanic that they use in later games as well. Actually, for a few games. And of course, you also get, your some new item like the parachute, which is actually kind of a neat thing to get. The Leonardo machines missions, which you don't have to complete them all. You do if you want the parachute. But you get use of the parachute in the next game anyhow. Of course, in this one, you can get also by completing missions for the thieves and the courtesans, and I don't know if the mercenaries have missions as well. But as you compete in them, or as you do them, you or complete these items, even your courtesans get certain upgrades too, and the thieves. Like the courtesans, if you complete enough tasks, you can actually have them walking around with you, and they're gonna pickpocket for you. This is kind of easy to do. Or say while they are standing around or something, or while they're with they're entertaining a guard or something, they will quote poison him. But as you say, and like I said, these are all new things that add to the game to a degree. Of course, I didn't necessarily like you have to, in order to start upgrading certain things, and of course, you need to open tunnels up. That's your fast travel system in the game. That's your only fast travel system in the game. Of course, once you unlock that and all that, you can travel anywhere. You can actually also purchase and restore landmarks in Rome, which add to your income too. I think for the podcast, I managed to renovate everything. The only thing I didn't do when I did that was, of course, the Leonardo thing when I play it for the podcast, because that wasn't available for some reason. Or I overlooked it entirely. Or it's something that doesn't unlock until you at least complete the game once, which is entirely possible. Now, was this a fun game? Yes, it was a fun game. There are it has a lot of mechanics that I appreciate in this game. There are certain ones that I wouldn't necessarily put in the game again, but that's just, and they don't. I should know. For the podcast at the time of this recording, I'm working on Syndicate. And there is a whole bunch of things that they kept in. But that's what I'm going to say about Assassin's Creed Bloodlines. Next time I talk about that in a retrospective, we'll be talking about Revelations. But probably by the time I do that one, we'll have done Syndicate on the podcast, and might be working on the second phase of the games, which is the more open world style. But until then, I'd like you all to take care and have fun, and thanks for listening. Bye!